Hello and welcome to part 2 of Birds on a Budget. And this week we're looking at how do you determine which camera is best for you. Now when looking for second-hand cheaper alternatives for wildlife photography, it's all too easy to get preoccupied with specification sheets without looking at the whole picture. It can mean just because camera X does not have a specific feature that camera Y has, then camera X must be inferior. The cameras I'm looking at today are the Canon EOS 80D and the Sony A6500. Now both of these were introduced in 2016. Both have 24 megapixel sensors and both can be found second-hand for roughly the same price. The 80D is a DSLR and is probably considered retro tech now, and the A6500, being mirrorless, is seen as the more up-to-date technology. Let's see how the specs compare. So, on the whole, the Sony seems to be the better camera, as it has an electronic viewfinder that provides real-time exposure feedback. It has better video capabilities, better ISO range, better dynamic range. It has IBIS, and it's all in a smaller and lighter package. So you'd think that the Sony should be the camera to get, but not so fast. Let's have a look at how it performs in real-world usage. Now the A6500 body is not overly small, but the button and dial placements leave a little to be desired. There are twin control dials, but they're both on the rear of the camera, meaning that your thumb has to do double duty. To me, the lack of a front dial around or near to the shutter button is a big handicap. Now when it comes to using Sony cameras, this is not my first rodeo. I have an A7R and an A7R II, so I'm quite familiar with the idiosyncrasies of the menu system. But having said that, I still find them labyrinthine and illogically laid out, and the paucity of physical buttons and dials means that menu diving on the A6500 is quite frequent. There is only one SD slot, and although I prefer 2 slots, it's not a big consideration for me. Your mileage may vary. The SD card slot is located in the battery compartment, and this is a major pain. Even when shooting handheld, it is fiddly to change cards, and shooting on a tripod makes it downright frustrating. Often I find myself having to take the battery out just to access the SD card. And speaking of the battery compartment, the battery in itself is hopeless. If I go out for a day shooting photos, then I have to take 2 spares, and if I intend to shoot any video, I take at least 4. Luckily, they are readily available and reasonably priced. The LCD EVF on the left side of the body is good for its time. It is nice and detailed while being responsive. The rear LCD is of the flip-up variety. I prefer the fully articulated type, but it's no big deal and I can work with both. The quality of the screen is abysmal. It is very hard to see in bright sunshine, and it becomes very dim when shooting 4K video, making it all but useless. Sony claims it's a touch screen, but it's very limited in function. It can only be used for selecting AF points and nothing else. And the implementation of that is pretty poor, as it is laggy when working well and downright unresponsive when it isn't. I've been in situations where I'm repeatedly touching the screen and the focus point is not moving, meaning I've lost the shot, which is very, very frustrating. Speaking of autofocus, it works very well. Having the AF points spread out over the whole sensor is great, which means you can really concentrate on your composition. The AF is very quick and locks on moving subjects. Another nice feature is that you can link spot metering to the active AF point. The electronic shutter is another feature that I really like, and although the rolling shutter is quite pronounced when shooting moving subjects, I like to use it with shy wildlife, as it means I don't disturb it. In-body image stabilization, or IBIS, is fantastic. Now, while it's not as good as that on other cameras I've used, such as Olympus and Panasonic, it works very well and is very welcome when shooting handheld video. Image quality is impressive. Shooting RAW, the files are very malleable in processing as long as you get your exposure right. The high ISO performance is quite impressive, and the dynamic range is such that I don't feel the need to blend exposures to get details in the shadows and the highlights when shooting scenes with high subject brightness range. When shooting video, the story is a little complicated. The 4K is nice and detailed and looks very good, but it is only 8-bit and so can't be pushed too much in post. The provision of flat profiles, S-Log2 and 3, is good to have when shooting contrasty scenes outside. Shooting 1080p, the footage is softer and doesn't look so good. It's okay, but I prefer to shoot 4K and then downsize it to HD on export. Focus peaking, zebras, live histograms, they're all features that make shooting video easier, and it's good to see them on the A6500. Well, let's look at the Canon EOS 80D in real world use. And I've now switched over to filming with that camera. See if you can tell any difference. Canon, for all their faults, of which there are many, has always produced well sorted, nice handling cameras. The 80D is no different. The camera fits well in the hand, the buttons and dials are well laid out and they're intuitive to use. This attention to detail extends to the camera menus, which are simply and logically laid out. Like the Sony A6500, there is only one card slot, but it's positioned on the side of the hand grip behind its own door. This makes it easy to access under all situations. The battery is the venerable Canon LPE6 and it lasts forever. Sure, this is partly down to the fact that SLRs draw less power than mirrorless cameras. However, it is also a gutsier battery at 7.2 volts, 1800 milliamp hours and 13 watt hours compared to the Sony's 7.4 volts at 1080 milliamp hours and 7.3 watt hours of the Sony NP FW50. The upside of this is that I've rarely used more than one battery for a full day of shooting. The optical viewfinder is nice and large and clear. Although I now prefer EVFs because of the real-time exposure feedback, the 80D's viewfinder is very pleasant to use. The rear LCD screen is of the fully articulated flippy flappy type, which I really like, not just for shooting video but also for shooting landscapes and macro in the vertical orientation. The screen has a teensy weeny bit more resolution than the A6500, but it's more importantly it is bright and clear when using in bright sunlight. It is also a proper touch screen. You can control the camera, go through the menus and review images with it. While there is no joystick to select autofocus points, you can use the screen to do this and it is responsive. While we're talking about autofocus, it helps to view it as two cameras in one body. Using it as an SLR with the optical viewfinder, the 45 AF points are all centrally grouped. If when composing an image your subject is outside of that area, then you have to go back to the time-honoured method of focusing and recomposing. The autofocus is quick and with a well-calibrated lens, very accurate. Now when using the rear LCD screen in live view, the performance is like a mirrorless camera, with every pixel on the sensor doing double duty as an AF point. The AF has face detection that works quite well, although how responsive this will be depends upon the lens. Those with STM motors work the best. Another much missed feature is the in-body image stabilization, so you have to depend upon the IS in the lens, if it in fact has it. The image quality is good. It's a real leap up from the 18 megapixel sensor that Canon seemingly used forever. But with that said, it's not as good as that in the A6500. The dynamic range of the Canon 80D is 13.17 EV as opposed to 13.67 of the Sony as measured by DxO. The amount is paltry and in real life terms negligible. If we look at the ISO performance and particularly noise, then both cameras are fairly equal up to 800. At 1600 ISO, the A6500 is about a stop better, and at 3200 it's 1.5 stops better. The highest maximum native ISO on the 80D is 16,000 ISO, and this can be extended to 25,600. The A6500 tops out natively at 256,000, which can be extended by a stop to 512,000. Which is staggering when you think about it. On the 80D, the furthest I'd go is 6,400 ISO. And on the Sony A6500, I'd go as high as 12,800 ISO. But having said this, I am using Topaz Denoise AI to clean the images up. Your tolerances to noise may be a lot lower than mine. For video, the lack of 4K on the 80D can be seen as a major drawback. I shoot all my video at 4K and then in post will often crop in and then I can output the final file as HD. The HD on the 80D is an improvement on the previous 18 and 20 megapixel sensors that Canon used. It's also better than the HD from the Sony. There is no flat profile on the camera, however, but I solved that by installing the Cine style profile from Technicolor, and I'm getting great results with that. The video output is again 8-bit, so it can't be pushed around too much in post. When shooting video, the lack of an EVF is a bit of a hindrance, but thankfully the rear LCD screen is of high quality. The touch screen implementation makes operating the camera a doddle, and another feature I really like is the ability to create a My Menu spread over 3 pages, and I've made one of those pages dedicated to video functions, so there's no scrolling through video menus endlessly looking for the various functions you need. The AF in video works much better than I expected, but again, this is really lens dependent. While it is quick to acquire and initially lock on, it does have the annoying tendency to drift off the subject and onto the background. You need to keep tapping the touch screen to maintain the focus on the subject. Unfortunately, Canon doesn't provide any focus peaking for help with manual focusing, and no zebras to warn about clipping. You do get a histogram on the screen though. So in summing up, the thing that became very apparent when using both of these cameras is that user experience plays an important part. Canon and Sony have very different design philosophies. Sony is a more technology-based company and looks to throw as much technology into a product without any consideration of the user's experience when using it. Canon take a much more conservative approach to technology, nothing too cutting edge, and then look to bundle it in a product that is pleasant to use and reliable. Both cameras are very suitable for nature and wildlife photography, but the user experience is very different. The technology of the Sony A6500 is negated by poor design and handling. I feel I'm fighting the A6500 every inch of the way to get it to work, and that's a miserable experience. The 80D overcomes its shortcomings by being a joy to use. It literally disappears, allowing me to concentrate on the photography. Unfortunately, when it comes to wildlife videography, both are wanting. The Canon needs more technology in the form of 4K video, focus peaking and waveforms, and the A6500 needs a better touchscreen, a better rear LCD panel and better menus to make it more useful. So where does that leave us? Well, when buying a camera, whether it be new or second hand, while the specification sheet may be useful as a guide, I think more attention should be given to the ergonomics. What does the camera feel like in the hand? What's it feel like to use? These are the questions that need to be addressed rather than how many megapixels or how much dynamic range. All the dynamic range in the world is of no use if you hate using the camera and just leave it at home. I hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Goodbye.